So who would have thought after 2 decades, 3 decades working in financial services that we'd be celebrating Women's Day at Chatham with so many great female leaders here?
It is. It's pretty amazing to see how far we've come in the last 10 years. I mean, I think half of our leadership team being women is something to be really proud of.
Yeah, I mean, going from my first career in asset management where there were literally no women to where we are today. So I think, we should be proud of the progress we've made. Still got more to go.
I agree.
Always room for improvement.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we should be celebrating that for sure. People always ask whether, we've had a mentor that was a woman. And I didn't officially have a mentor. And I actually think some of the men that I've worked for in my career were as good a mentor in terms of recognizing potential, recognizing what you needed for your own development to succeed in a sector where there weren't many women who'd already paved the way.
Right. I totally agree. I think my experience has been very similar, where I think I have been, oftentimes the only woman in the room, but I have felt encouraged to really kind of lean into those things that kind of make me unique and kind of add a different perspective to the conversation. And a lot of that mentorship came from men. I think it's also, there are many women, I think, that have inspired me as well throughout my career, but it's not a gender thing to me.
Yeah.
Earlier part of my career, had an interaction with it was a fairly senior partner that kind of pulled me aside and told me that I really needed to lean into my more aggressive or witchy side, so to speak. And I was really, put off by that, not because not because I'm soft and, don't feel assertive, but because I don't want to pretend to be something I'm not. And that's not me. And I didn't like the idea that I was being told to conform to something like a stereotype of what a successful businesswoman looks like. And I think I have kind of carried that with me throughout my career in both how I think about myself and how I show up and interact with people, but also how I try and encourage other people to really, lean into who you are, what are your strengths, and don't try and, be something that you're not. I think that in the end of the day, it's best to be the best version of you. So that's something that I think about often.
Yeah, because if you think about the span of our careers in general, 30, 40 years, I mean, you couldn't go through that entire time play acting.
No,
to
exhausting.
Be something else,
Right.
Emotionally and physically exhausting.
It doesn't feel authentic either.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we're in meetings and discussions, I don't think there's, anyone that sits there thinking I'm the only one that's got anything important to say.
Right.
And sometimes we all have that little voice of thinking, oh, I'm not sure if my idea is the best one, or maybe I don't want to sound like I'm repeating what someone else has said.
Right.
I think as I've gone through my career, I've thought I always feel worse afterwards if I haven't spoken up.
Said it. Yeah.
Yeah. So just keep telling yourself, just say it, because when the meeting's over and the opportunity has passed, you'll regret not having said it during the conversation.
Agree. Yes. And I think another good lesson for me, it's, I have a different perspective to add. And it's not that it's, the obvious solution to everybody else. And I think when we, push ourselves and, encourage each other to voice those opinions, I think we get to better answers by sharing those perspectives.
Yeah, and I do think a big part about the sort of inspiration for women like us that have been fortunate enough to land in a leadership position and worked hard to get there for sure. But how do we help be more inspirational? And it always sounds like so grand, let's be, but actually it's the small things, right?
It is.
And encouraging people to speak up, maybe having some informal mentoring. So I always say it's the biggest compliment to be asked by anyone to give them guidance on, it could be a specific issue or a career, or sometimes it's personal things, people balancing personal life with professional life. So, and I think you had mentioned before about how that's a real mutually beneficial
I think so.
conversation.
Yeah, I think I get as much out of those conversations as hopefully they're getting too. But yeah, I think it takes a little bit of the pressure off in asking someone to be a mentor if you can think about it as a mutually beneficial relationship, because I really do think it is.
Yeah. I had a interesting interaction with someone at a train station, and I had worked with her very briefly, maybe just 18 months. She wasn't part of my team, she was part of the bigger organization. And she left the business, and then a few years later, I was walking through a train station in London, and I heard this voice calling my name, and I turned around and she ran up behind me. And I remembered who she was. I remembered her name and said, "Oh, it's nice to see you." And she said, "Oh, I couldn't believe I bumped into you." She said, "I mean, you were responsible for transforming my career." And I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh,
Wow.
what did I do?" And it turned out it was a very informal conversation where she was saying that she wanted to move into a slightly different direction, but stay in the industry, and would our skills be transferable? And again, it was informal. It was like over coffee in the kitchen. And she did leave the business. I was sad to see her go, but yeah, just something I hadn't even thought about. So I
Those
think
little
we're seeing,
interactions
yeah,
that can
the
really
small
mean a
things
lot.
that make a
Yeah.
difference. Yeah. So it's nice to be here and celebrating Women's Day and being part of a financial services firm with such strong female leadership. And we talked about how far we've come as an industry and as a country. But as we celebrate Women's Day internationally, of course, we look across other areas of the world where there's still a lot of progress to be made. And I think it's sometimes people can look at that and be quite negative about it. But again, if I were to look back to the beginning of my career, I would never have envisaged that this is where I would be kind of 3 decades later. So I think we've got to celebrate the progress that's been made, but recognise other parts of the world have a long way to go.
Yeah, and I think that progress is really inspiring for the impact that we can have in those other areas. And I do think it's nice to take the opportunity to celebrate and appreciate how far we've come and all of the amazing women that have been part of blazing that trail. But I do think it's important to recognize the role that kind of everyone plays in supporting that, and everyone being inclusive, both men and women. Embracing that inclusive mindset, I think, is a huge part of driving this forward.
Yeah.